A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to the ICANN initiative, the Hindu and Indian Express analysis. So, we will start the day with the story of the day. So, this is a story of a mother camel and a baby camel. So, one day they were talking to each other when the baby camel asks the mother, "Mother, why do we have lumps?" Then the mother replies that we have humps so that we can store water when we are on long journeys in the desert. So then the baby camel asks, "Why do we have a rounded feet, mother?" The mother camel says that we need to walk on the desert sand for long distances. So, to be able to comfortably walk in the desert sand, we have rounded feet. The baby camel then says, "All right, then why do we have our eyelashes so long?" The mother camel says that these long eyelashes are going to protect us from the dust and sand in the desert. So they will be a protective cover for the eyes. So then the baby camel thinks for a while and then it says, "So if we have humps to store water for desert journeys, rounded hooves so that we can walk in the desert sand, and long eyelashes which can protect us against the desert sand and dust, then what are we doing in a zoo?" So then, with this reply of the baby, the mother was awestruck. So, what the story implies is that there are several situations in our lives where we actually want to be somewhere, but we are actually somewhere else. We have heard of many people who do not like their jobs, but they are there because they have no other choice but to be there. So, we end up doing so many things which we actually don't like, but we still do it. Whether like taking up a job which we don't want, which we don't like. This also shows lack of professional integrity in the first place. So it is very important that we do what we love and we realize our own potential and expertise, our own skills, our own interests where it lies, and then accordingly decide what we have to do. So even in some ethics case studies or even in the essays, you will come across questions you will have to convince somebody for doing something. So for instance, if somebody wants to choose sports as a career, so parents are against it, so how are you going to convince that person? So these are normal situation based questions that you might get in ethics or even in your interview preparation for that matter. So how will you convince a person? You can use these very simple stories which actually carry a lot of deep profound meanings. So with the help of these stories, you can make a person easily convinced rather than just telling that no, it's important to do what you love and all that. So with this, we will move on to the first topic of the day. We'll be talking about racism. So we have already seen a lot about racism, the incidents of George Floyd in USA and other things about racism, the civil rights movement. We have already seen a little bit of it. So in this, we'll be seeing what racism exactly is. So this article goes on to define, if I may say so, what racism is. So racism is basically a systematic ideology. So this ideology means it is a set of beliefs and practices. So these beliefs and practices are based on biology, but even if it is based on biology, and that per se is not wrong, but this set of beliefs and practices which are based on biology ends up dividing the humanity into a higher and a lower. So it is like the higher us and the lower them. So you can say racism is a systematic ideology. It is actually a complex set of beliefs and practices which are based on biology, but it divides humanity into a higher us and a lower them. So this is like the definition or a basic understanding of what racism is. So the moment we say that we are a higher us and the lower them, it means it's kind of creating a sense of hierarchy. So this sense of hierarchy that is getting created is a very important characteristic of racism. So in this hierarchy, it is always seen that whoever is in the lower rungs in this hierarchy, it is okay to be unjust to them, it is okay to be cruel to them. So this is what creates a lot of discrimination in the society because of this hierarchy that gets created. So if we are seeing that way, there is a higher us and a lower them, there is us, them, there is superior, inferior, and pure and contaminated. So, in fact, this notion gets created apart from the notion of hierarchy. Another thing that becomes a very important characteristic in of racism is that there is always a feeling that mixing with the other race, it will lead to pollution and contamination. So that is why the interaction or the mingling is kept to a minimum. And this becomes even more pronounced when we talk of sexual contamination through inter-race marriages. So, in fact, in several of the southern states in United States, they had very severe laws which even sanctioned public lynching if there was an interracial marriage. So this pollution or contamination was not tolerated. So this is where it becomes problematic. So just being color conscious per se, that is identifying a person by saying, okay, that person who was dark in color, that per se is not problematic. But there is an acute awareness of color where this sense of hierarchy and this sense of contamination, and thus because of this feeling it leads to injustice, cruelty and discrimination. That is where racism crops up. So you can write this shortly in your answers. So it just these four lines will make the evaluator see that you have understood the concept of racism. With just 8 words you have conveyed a lot here. Kinds of representations are very helpful in exam. The second thing this particular article talks about is, even when we are talking of racism, racism is also of two kinds. So at the apex level is that kind of racism where you feel that the other race is so inferior that it has to be exterminated. So one of the most important illustrations of this is the Nazi Germany. So the anti-Semitism in the Nazi Germany that led to the Holocaust or the genocide of the Jews. So where you feel that the race is so inferior that it has no right of existence and they are exterminated. So that is the example is Nazi Germany. The second type of racism is where you feel that yes, the other race is very inferior, but that race will have to be controlled, they have to be subordinated, and they must be our slaves. So they continue to exist, they are not massacred or killed, but then there is a very strong feeling that they are like our slaves and they need to be controlled and subordinated. So this is the second type of racism. So these are the two important types. And so what another important thing that happens in the case of racism is, whenever we say that a person is uneducated, if a black is uneducated for instance, that could be because of his very poor socio-economic conditions. So he could be uneducated because of his poor socio-economic conditions. But however, what is actually thought of is that okay, the person is uneducated because he has inherited a very low IQ. So this poor intelligence is in genes only. So that is because he is more into savagery, he is more predatory, and he does all the crimes in the society. So that is why he has inherited a low IQ, and that is why he is uneducated. So this kind of feeling gets more stronger in the society against the so-called inferior race. So it is felt that these people have inferior IQ, so they get into all the crime stuff. So therefore, in order to keep the society and the civilization safe, these people needed to be controlled through brute force. So that is the feeling when we see somebody of an inferior race who is uneducated. So similarly, lack of avenues. So this actually works like there is lack of economic avenues where these people could work and earn for themselves. So because of lack of avenues, they are unable to improve the quality of their lives. Because they are unable to improve the quality of their lives, they get into some petty crimes. So they do that. So because of these petty crimes, they get imprisonment. And because they are imprisoned, it leads to a stigmatization in the society that this race is meant to just commit crimes and be in the prison. So from this stigma starts a severe discrimination. So this is the whole flow that goes on. But it is actually because of the lack of economic avenues for them that these things are happening. So once the economic avenues are given to them, they will not be engaged in crimes. So it is because of this that they are getting engaged in crimes. But what is actually thought of is that crime is in their genes, so they will perform all the crimes. So the stigma is there in the society, and that is why they are getting discriminated against. So this is one this is the most important thing about racism. Now I will move on to the next topic, which is regarding the India-China relations. So again, we have discussed in detail about the India-China relations, the reasons for the recent standoff between the soldiers of the two countries. So all of that has already been discussed. And when I was going through the comments, some of you wanted me to discuss in brief about the same issue. But what I feel is, rather than discussing very briefly about that issue, it will not even give you a clear picture of the issue. And secondly, some of the other students have been following the initiative religiously, so it will be a lot of redundancy for them, and the length of the video will unnecessarily increase also. So we will give the links of those videos, videos where these issues were previously discussed, so you can go through that. But in some cases, we have discussed, say, one particular issue in so many previous videos that it is not possible even for us to give the links. So I would rather suggest you to, rather than doing one video a day, do 2 videos a day. So in 1 month's time, you will be able to complete 2 months of videos also. Apart from the June's video, you'll be able to complete May video. So similarly, do it for July. So by the time July ends, you will be finishing April and July both. So you can do like that now, because you will have more time and you don't have to worry about prelims as of now. And your primary goal now should be to focus on mains. So you can do that. That would be my suggestion. So now coming to India-China relations, again, regarding the reasons for the recent standoff, we have already seen them multiple times. So one more important reason, which I had discussed previously, but in this article it was given with more clarity. So that is why I'm discussing only that issue which was there in this particular article. So what it says is that now China is the soldiers are facing off in eastern Ladakh, in the Galwan Valley, and in the Nakula in Sikkim. So these are the 3 points where the intrusions or the face off between the soldiers are happening. So now what is the reason for this? So when India diluted Article 370 of the Constitution last year, it created 2 union territories, the UT of Jammu and Kashmir and UT of Ladakh. So previously, Ladakh was part of the state government of Jammu and Kashmir, and Jammu and Kashmir had a considerable amount of autonomy. So India would not have had much say about the issues that are happening in Ladakh, because it was a part of Jammu and Kashmir. But now that Ladakh has become a union territory where the center has more control over it, so this will allow India a more freer hand in contesting China's claims in the region. So this has worried China a lot. Apart from this, we have seen that there was increasing road building activity on India's part close to the LAC. So this has also augmented China's perception that after the dilution of Article 370 and formation of the Union Territory of Ladakh, the center started to have more say in the affairs of Ladakh, and therefore it has given India more freer hand in contesting Chinese claims in the Ladakh region. So another thing that China is worried about is this particular region, the Ladakh region, is also bordering China's provinces of Xinjiang and Tibet also. And it is also contiguous to the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And this is where China has made huge investments in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So for China, this has a strategic importance. So if India becomes active in the Ladakh region, that could in a way threaten Chinese investments in the POK, which is the CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So this could be threatened, is what China is worried about. Because China has already invested a lot in CPSC, and also it is of strategic importance to China. Because this particular road is going to connect Pakistan occupied Kashmir with Gwadar, which is a port in that opens to the Arabian Sea in Pakistan. So that is going to give China a presence in the Arabian Sea, that is the Indian Ocean also, which is very important for China. So the strategic importance of this road that goes through POK, and Ladakh is contiguous to POK. So this is what is also disturbing China, because of which it is showing increased activities in the this region now. So this reason was very well explained in this article about CPEC and its connection to Gwadar and how it is strategically important to China and how it feels insecure about it, and that is why it wants to keep the border issue more active. So this was about the reason for the conflicts. We will the next topic, which is climate change. So this was a very informative article. It mainly spoke about two curves. One is a carbon dioxide emission curve and the other is the global average temperature curve. So these are the two important data that you must know when we talk of climate change. So we will first see the carbon dioxide emissions. So the carbon dioxide emissions, as back as 1850, it was just 0.2 billion tons of carbon dioxide that was emitted. But come to 2018, this was 36 billion tons of carbon dioxide that was emitted. So you can see such a huge increase in the amount of carbon dioxide emissions. But if all these emissions were to be in the atmosphere itself, then Earth would have been a totally different planet today. But thanks to the vegetation and on the land and thanks to the oceans who have been able to absorb at least half of this carbon dioxide that is getting emitted. So this is the data on the carbon dioxide emissions. And we should also know that at the current point of time, the carbon dioxide the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has reached 407 parts per million in 2018. So this is a very high concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the next thing we will be looking at is the global average temperature. So this article doesn't give a very clear data regarding the global average temperature. So it says that yes, definitely there has been a rise in the global temperature and there has been a warming trend, and this could be attributed to the concept of climate change. So it also, when it says global average temperature, it gives indirect references of those events which indicate that the global average temperatures have increased. So for example, in 2003, there was a heat wave in the Europe which had killed 70,000 people. So similarly, if you talk of 2019, which is the latest, the Amazon fire was there. And then in 1920, if you talk of the bushfire in Australia, so that was unprecedented in its scale and devastation, is the bushfire in Australia. So all of these instances go on to show that definitely there is an average temperature rise in the global level, and all these things are happening. So in order to curb this average temperature of the globe from being too high, so the countries came to a Paris Agreement under the UNFCCC, so United Nations Framework on Climate Change. So this UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement was signed, wherein the countries had agreed that they would take up activities so that it will help in keeping the global temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial level. So pre-industrial level means before the Industrial Revolution began. So the Paris Agreement, the countries agreed that they would keep the global temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius in the pre-industrial level. So because of this, countries will now need more funding so that they are able to fund the climate smart projects, and they are able to curb the temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius rise. So in this regard, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that is IPCC, has observed that. So this whole thing will require that by 2035, we invest $2.4 trillion in more energy efficient systems if we have to keep the ambitious target of keeping the global temperatures from rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial levels. So if we have to keep the global temperature from rising to below 1.5 degrees Celsius of the pre-industrial levels, then we will have to invest $2.4 trillion by 2035, and this will come to nearly 2.5% of the global GDP. So this is the level of investment that needs to be made in order to be in the energy efficient systems if we have to keep the global temperatures from rising. But where will the fund come from? So there are several funding issues. In fact, at the United Nations Climate Conference in 2009 itself, the richest nations had pledged that they would be giving 100 billion as aid every year to poorer countries for their adaptation and mitigation projects for tackling climate change. But if you look at 2017, which is the latest year for which the data is available, only $71 billion were given for this. And out of this, nearly 80% went to the mitigation only. Only 20% went towards adaptation. So adaptation is any day better than mitigation. So adaptation is you are learning to live with this, but mitigation is you are trying to reduce the after effects or the consequences of climate change. So 80% is going to mitigation itself, but more needs to be spent on adaptation. So only 20% went on adaptation. And if you look at the COVID crisis now, it is highly doubtful that these countries are going to keep up to this pledge of providing $100 billion a year to the poorer countries for adaptation and mitigation measures. So this data is very important. So that is all about the climate change. So next is higher education rankings. So in this, the Times higher education rankings are out. So in this, all the top 5 Indian institutes of technology and the Indian Institute of Science, they have all dropped in this year's rankings. And this year's all the top 7 IITs have also jointly decided to boycott the Times higher education rankings. They had done that earlier this year itself. So then what is the issue? So you may have a question like the higher education rankings globally show that Indian institutes are not performing at par with the international standards. So analyze this statement critically. So, or what is your view on it? So one view is definitely there are several issues in the education sector which needs to be improved. But the counter issue is that these rankings are also not foolproof. Time and again, India has pointed out at the lack of transparency in these criteria that the higher education rankings employ. That is precisely the reason why the HRD ministry had also come out with its own set of all India rankings for our institutes. Why? Because our institutes operate in a completely different set of circumstances and environment compared to the Western or the other institutes. And several of the criteria that these rankings employ, they are not suitable for the Indian setting. So there are several such issues. See, one thing is that one issue, for instance, why our rankings have been very poor is that these rankings have one criteria which talks about the presence of international faculty and international students. So Indian institutes have gotten a 0 score on this ratio of international faculty and students. So this is one thing, international faculty. And then it talks about the number of Nobel laureates who are teaching in these institutions. So that again is less for India. And thirdly, another criteria important is that faculty to student ratio. So in India, this ratio is more. Rather, it should have been less. But in India, that is also more. And the reason is because, one reason for that is because we only count the full-time faculties. But in American universities, even the PhD students who are teaching and even the research assistants, even they are counted as faculty. So that is why their number of faculty will definitely be more, and as a ratio with the number of students, so they will definitely be better off. So these are the genuine issues that India have with these criteria and parameters which are employed in these rankings. So whenever you talk about or evaluate the standard of higher education in India in these institutions against the global standards, you must also recognize that even though there are the rankings are poor and Indian institutes have dropped in the rankings and there are several issues, the one issue is also the fact that these rankings are not they don't completely fit with respect to the Indian institutions as they operate in a different set of environment. So even these institutions in the West, they do not have much this policy of reservation, but we do have. So similarly, the student-teacher ratio also, we don't consider the research assistants and the PhD students as faculty, but the Western institutes do. So there is a lot of difference in all these things, and we have to adjust these differences to figure out our actual ranking. So that is one important thing. So the next topic will be transparency and accountability. So this is an example, or rather I would say, of transparency and accountability about the PM cares. So it is said that there is lack of transparency when it comes to PM cares. Why? Because it has been stated that the CAG audit will not be applicable to this fund of PM Care. So this fund will not be audited by the CAG, but rather it will be audited by some independent auditors appointed by the trust. So this is one thing. And the second one is about the audit. The second is that PMO has also refused to make any documents which are related to the PM Cares funds public. So public, it is not getting publicized. So all the documents related to this fund are not publicized. So that is another thing, that there is lack of transparency. People do not know where the fund is going, and several questions are being raised because of this. So for instance, there has been this huge migrant crisis. So whether and how much of the PM Cares funds went to help these migrants, we do not know. And since the announcement of the lockdown, nearly more than 12 crore people have lost their jobs. So whether and how much of the PM Cares funds were allocated to create jobs, to give jobs to these people, that again is not clear. So there is lack of transparency and accountability when we talk of the PM Cares fund. So this is one example, and we have two more articles. One is on India-Nepal relations, which again has been covered, and another on the MG Narega, and again which have discussed in detail and analyzed the whole scheme. So these two articles I'm not covering. So next is yesterday's question. Yesterday's question was, what was yesterday's question? Yeah, so what are the important qualities of a civil servant that you think the civil servant should possess, and also give examples for two of these qualities from your own lives. So in these kinds of questions, first task is to identify the qualities of a civil servant. So there will be so many qualities like honesty, integrity, then there will be empathy and compassion, there will be objectivity, there will be transparency, there will be teamwork or esprit de corps. Then there will be communication skills or interpersonal skills, then decision making skills, then what else, then being more innovative, not being risk aversive. So there are so many qualities that a civil servant should possess. So you will first of all make a list, or you will elicit the qualities which you think a civil servant should possess, and then you have to select any of the two qualities, and you have to give two examples. Now while selecting any of the two qualities, it doesn't matter which quality you select. Okay, so don't think that okay, the most superior of this is this and next is this. So don't try to put them in a hierarchy. There is nothing like that. All of these are equally important, and you can give examples from your lives. Depending upon how good the example is, you can give it for anything. So that is one thing that you have to remember. And second is that when you're giving your personal life examples, try to give it with some amount of detail. So don't be very superficial, like you were honest, or you were empathetic. That means yes, there are several simple examples. Like for example, it is one thing to say that I was empathetic because I used to give my seat in the bus to an elderly person. Yes, that shows empathy, but then put little more details, that you were traveling like this and then you had entered a bus, so wherein you saw the elderly was standing and he had no place to sit. There were others who were not offering any seat, though there is a designated seat for the elderly. People were sitting there, so you couldn't see his pain, and then you got up from your seat and offered. So like put some details so that it looks that you actually went through this. So it is from your eyes, it's from your experience that you're writing. That has to be more clear, for which you need to put some more details into your answer. So as this is talking about your real life examples, and every one of us have, I'm very sure you must have definitely displayed, in fact, all of these qualities over a period of our lives. It is just that the best preparation for ethics is just sit back, relax, and then try to recollect examples for each of these keywords from your own lives where you have displayed it. So for instance, honesty or integrity, if I say, so then I had to take this driving license from the RTO, and during those days there was a lot of corruption that used to go on, and almost everybody went through some agents or some middlemen and bribed them. So that's how they got the licenses. So I was failed for 3 times or 3 or 4 times, I think, but I still went without the middleman and without paying money to anybody, and then I got my license. So even in spite of the first and second failures, I was not deterred. I never thought that I should again take a middleman and bribe and then go, because the tests that I was failing in, it was not that I didn't perform well. I was doing really well, but then I was being purposefully failed. So but still I made sure that no matter what, I'm not going to compromise on this. So this is one thing. Similarly, even if I have to talk about empathy, yesterday itself I had to go somewhere. So I had taken a cab and I paid the driver of the cab 100 rupees more than the amount that I had to pay. So because we know that COVID crisis is there, so they are also undergoing a lot of crisis. After so many days now, they are getting riders. So it's very important to think from their point of view also. Don't there is no need to bargain with such people. So these are very small examples. This was just yesterday's example. So what you need is to just sit, think about when and where you have displayed these qualities, make a list of them, and try to put in more details. Try to recollect exactly what happened during that time, and try to give in more details rather than just in 2 lines finishing the answer. So that is what, even if it is authentic, but it is also important to make it look authentic, because many people will also cook up instances. That is okay, that is up to you. You can cook up instances, but at least give more details so that at least it looks more authentic. So there is nothing much to discuss in this. So you can come out with your own life examples. That is only the demand of this question. Now today's question is, what is transparency and accountability? Why are they important in civil services? A 10-mark question for 150 words. So that's it for today. Thank you.